The morning sun stretched across the dusty courtyard of the small primary school on the outskirts of Nairobi. 12-year-old McKenna arrived earlier than the other students, as he did most days. This quiet time before classes was precious to him. He carefully placed his worn backpack beside the door of the music room and peered through the window to make sure the room was empty. With practiced stealth, he slipped inside and made his way to the old keyboard tucked away in the corner. The keyboard was a donation from a church group that had visited their village 3 years ago. It was missing 5 keys, and several others stuck when pressed too hard. But to McKenna, it was the most valuable thing in the entire school. He ran his fingers gently across the plastic keys, careful not to make any sound just yet. First, he had to make sure no one was coming. "Just 15 minutes, he whispered to himself, checking the cracked wristwatch his father had given him for his 10th birthday. 15 minutes of practice before the school day began. McKenna closed his eyes and began to play. His fingers moved slowly at first, finding the melody of a song he'd heard on the radio at the village market. The notes were sometimes wrong, and he'd grimace slightly, adjusting until the sound matched what he heard in his mind. What McKenna didn't know was that he possessed something rare: perfect pitch, the ability to identify or reproduce any musical note without a reference tone. "That's not how it goes," he muttered to himself, trying again. This time the sequence of notes flowed more naturally, and a small smile formed on his lips. He'd never had a proper piano lesson. No one in his family had ever learned to play an instrument. His father worked long hours as a driver for a delivery company, and his mother sold vegetables at the local market. Music lessons were a luxury far beyond their means, especially with 4 younger siblings at home who needed school supplies and proper shoes. But McKenna had discovered music on his own. It started when he was 7, tapping out rhythms on empty water containers, progressing to creating different pitched sounds by filling glass bottles with varying amounts of water. By the time he was 10, he'd constructed a paper keyboard, drawing the keys on cardboard and practicing finger positions silently at night when his siblings were asleep. His breakthrough came when his school received the donated keyboard. The music teacher, Ms. Akinyi, had noticed how McKenna lingered after school, watching her lock up the music room with longing eyes. "Would you like to try it?" she had asked one afternoon, surprising him. He remembered how his hands had trembled that first time, how overwhelming it felt to touch real keys that made actual sounds. Miss Akinyi had shown him the basics, where middle C was located, how to position his hands, but she wasn't a pianist herself. She taught general music classes once a week, mostly singing and basic rhythm exercises with handmade drums and shakers. "I've never seen anyone pick it up so quickly," she had told him after watching him practice for just a week. "You have a gift, McKenna, a gift." The word had stayed with him, becoming a small flame of hope he protected carefully. The sound of voices in the courtyard pulled McKenna from his thoughts. Other students were arriving. With a sigh, he gently closed the keyboard cover and slipped out of the music room, retrieving his backpack on the way. Later that day, during lunch break, McKenna sat under the shade of an acacia tree, eating the leftover ugali and greens his mother had packed. Instead of joining the football game that most boys his age were playing, he took out his notebook, a precious possession with slightly yellowed pages, given to him by his uncle who worked at an office in the city. In this notebook, McKenna had created his own system of writing music. Not knowing standard musical notation, he'd developed a method using dots and lines to represent notes and durations. To anyone else, it looked like nonsensical scribbles, but to McKenna, it was a record of every melody that had ever captivated him. "Still drawing your secret codes?" His classmate Tano plopped down beside him, peering curiously at the notebook. McKenna quickly closed it. "They're not secret codes. They're songs." "Songs?" Tano laughed. "That doesn't look like any music I've ever seen." "That's because I made it up myself," McKenna replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "I can read it. That's what matters." "You're strange, you know that?" Tano said, but there was no malice in his words. "My brother says you should be playing football with us instead of wasting time with that old keyboard." "How will music ever feed your family?" It was a question McKenna had heard many times, including from his own father. In their community, practical skills were valued above all. Becoming a driver like his father, a mechanic, or getting an office job in the city, these were sensible aspirations. Playing piano? That was for wealthy people in big houses, not for boys from villages like theirs. I don't know, Makina admitted. But when I play, it feels right. Like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. Tano shrugged. Well, don't tell my brother I said this, but you do play better than anyone I've ever heard. Even better than the choir director at church. The compliment warmed Makina more than Tano could know. That evening, after helping his mother prepare dinner and assisting his younger siblings with their homework, Makina sat on the small stool outside their home. The night air was cool, and the distant sounds of neighbors talking and laughing created a comforting backdrop to his thoughts. His father arrived home late, as usual, the family's old motorcycle sputtering to a stop. Makina watched as his father's shoulders slumped with exhaustion, his work uniform dusty from the day's deliveries. Baba, Makina greeted, taking his father's lunch container. Makina. His father nodded, his voice tired but warm. How was school today? Good, I got full marks on my mathematics test. His father's face brightened. That's excellent. Mathematics will serve you well. Perhaps you can become an accountant someday. Makina nodded, not wanting to disappoint the hope in his father's eyes. They'd had the conversation about his piano playing before, and it usually ended the same way, with his father reminding him that dreams needed to be practical in a world where putting food on the table was the primary concern. Later that night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Makina carefully retrieved a small torch from under his mattress and his notebook. In the dim light, he began to work on a new composition, one that had been forming in his mind throughout the day. His fingers moved silently, playing invisible keys in the air as he mapped out the melody. The next morning, Ms. Akinyi found him already at the keyboard when she arrived to unlock the music room. Makina. How did you get in here? She asked, surprised. He looked down, embarrassed. The window latch is broken. I'm sorry, I just wanted to try something before class. Instead of scolding him, Ms. Akinyi listened as Makina played his new composition, a gentle melody that somehow captured both sadness and hope. Where did you learn this? She asked when he finished. I made it up, he said simply. Ms. Akinyi was silent for a moment, then sat down beside him on the bench. Makina, I've been teaching music in village schools for 15 years. I've never heard a child play like you, especially one who's never had lessons. Really? His voice was small, uncertain. Really? She hesitated, then continued. There's a music festival in Nairobi next month. Students from schools all over Kenya will perform. I think you should enter. Makina's eyes widened. Me, but I don't know how to play properly. I don't even know the right way to write music. That's true, Ms. Akinyi acknowledged. But talent like yours, it finds a way. I can help you prepare, teach you some proper notation. The rest, well, you already have inside you. For the next few weeks, Makina spent every spare moment practicing. Ms. Akinyi allowed him to use the music room during lunch breaks and after school. She brought him simple piano exercise books that a friend had loaned her and showed him how to read basic musical notation. It's like learning a new language, she explained. And you're already speaking it. You just didn't know the written words. The connection between his homemade notation and standard sheet music was revelatory for Makina. Each discovery felt like finding a missing puzzle piece, making sense of something he'd always felt but couldn't fully express. At home, things were tense. His father couldn't understand why Makina was spending so much time on music instead of helping with chores or focusing on serious subjects. Piano. Won't put food on our table, he said one evening, after Makina asked if he could attend the music festival. But Baba, Ms. Akinyi says I have a gift, Makina persisted, and there might be people at the festival who could help me learn more. Help you how? With money we don't have? With time I can't spare to take you to Nairobi for lessons? His father's voice was sharp with frustration. We are simple people, Makina. We must be realistic. His mother, who had been quietly listening while washing dishes, finally spoke. Let him try at least. What harm can come from trying? The festival was held at a large school in Nairobi, a place so different from Makina's village that he felt as though he'd stepped into another world. The main hall had a real grand piano, the first Makina had ever seen. When it was his turn to perform, he approached it with reverence, touching the smooth black surface as if it were made of gold. The judges, music teachers from prestigious schools, watched with mild interest as the small boy in a slightly too large school uniform took his place on the bench. When McKenna began to play, however, their expressions changed to surprise, then astonishment. He played his own composition, the one he'd been working on for weeks. It wasn't technically perfect. His lack of formal training was evident. But there was something in the music that transcended technique. The raw emotion, the natural understanding of melody and harmony, the intuitive grasp of musical structure, these things couldn't be taught. When he finished, the hall was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. The lead judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, approached him afterward. "Young man, where do you study piano?" she asked. "At my school," McKenna answered truthfully. "On the keyboard in the music room." The woman exchanged glances with her colleagues. "And your teacher?" "Ms. Akinyi teaches music at our school, but she doesn't really play piano. I mostly teach myself." That evening, Ms. Akinyi received a call from the festival organizers. They wanted to discuss McKenna's future. Words like prodigy and extraordinary talent were used, words that would soon change the trajectory of a 12-year-old boy's life in ways no one in his village could have imagined. And it all began because he dared to press those plastic keys in a dusty music room, creating sounds that somehow matched the melodies he heard in his dreams. I've created the first part of the story as requested. It's written in simple English with a natural tone, focusing on McKenna's village life, his discovery of piano, and how his talent begins to be recognized. The story is human-centered and avoids any content that would violate YouTube policies. Would you like me to continue with writing the remaining parts of the story? Or would you like me to make any adjustments to part 1 before moving forward? 3 months after the music festival, life in McKenna's village had changed in small but significant ways. Word of his performance had spread, and suddenly the boy who had once been known as that quiet kid who's always tapping rhythms became the piano boy. People from neighboring villages would sometimes stop by the school, hoping to hear him play. The most significant change, however, was the attitude of McKenna's father. The stern man had been shocked when the festival judges called him personally to discuss his son's rare talent. He'd stood straighter, his voice shifting from tired resignation to cautious pride as he listened to their praise. That evening, he'd looked at McKenna differently, not as a child with an impractical dream, but as a son with a gift that might open doors neither of them could have imagined. "I still don't understand where this talent comes from," he told McKenna one evening as they sat outside their home. "No one in our family has ever played music." McKenna shrugged. "I don't know either, Baba. It just feels like the music was always inside me, waiting to come out." His father nodded slowly. "Ms. Akinyi says there's a special program at a music school in Nairobi that offers scholarships to talented children. She has submitted your recording from the festival." McKenna's heart raced. "A real music school? With proper pianos?" "Yes, but," his father cautioned, "there are many talented children in Kenya. We must not get our hopes too high." Despite his father's warning, hope bloomed in McKenna's chest. He threw himself into practicing with renewed determination, arriving at school earlier each morning and staying later each afternoon. Ms. Akinyi had given him books on music theory borrowed from a friend who taught at a private school in the city, and McKenna absorbed the information like a sponge soaking up water. Then one afternoon, as McKenna was walking home from school, his friend Tano came running toward him. Out of breath and excited, "McKenna, have you heard?" "It's all over the radio," Tano exclaimed. "What is?" "The Golden Sounds. They're coming to Nairobi next month." McKenna's brow furrowed. "The Golden Sounds?" Tano looked at him in disbelief. "How can you not know them? They're only the most famous jazz band in the world right now. My cousin in America sent me their songs. The piano player, they call him the Professor, he's amazing. Even better than you," Tano added with a grin. That night, McKenna couldn't sleep. He slipped outside with his father's small radio and tuned it to the music station Tano had mentioned. After some static and a few commercials, the announcer's excited voice filled the night air. "That's right, music lovers. The Golden Sounds will be performing live at the Grand Sovereign Hotel in Nairobi on the 15th of next month. Tickets are selling fast for what promises to be the concert of the year." McKenna listened intently as the radio played a sample of the band's music. The complex jazz rhythms, the way the piano seemed to dance through the melody, it was unlike anything he had ever heard before. He closed his eyes, trying to memorize every note, every transition. The next day he approached Ms. Akinyi with determined eyes. "I need to see them play," he said without preamble. The golden sounds, Miss Akinyi's eyebrows rose. "Makina, those tickets are very expensive. And the Grand Sovereign is, well, it's not a place where just anyone can go." "I'll save money," he insisted. "I'll do extra jobs around the village. Please, I need to see a real jazz pianist play. I need to learn." Ms. Akinyi saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire she'd noticed the first time she'd caught him playing the old keyboard. "Let me see what I can find out," she said finally. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity for Makina. Every morning before school, he helped old Mr. Kabaki tend his small vegetable garden. After school, he ran errands for the women who sold fabrics at the market. On weekends, he washed motorcycles outside the village's only gas station. Every shilling he earned went into a small tin box his mother had given him. "You are working too hard," his mother worried one evening as she applied ointment to his cracked hands. "You are still a child." "I'm almost 13, Makina reminded her. "And this is important, Mama." By the time the concert date approached, Makina had saved almost enough for one ticket, the cheapest seat available. His parents, seeing his dedication, reluctantly agreed to contribute the remaining amount. "But you cannot go alone," his father insisted. "Nairobi is not safe for a boy your age." It was decided that Makina's cousin Jomo, who was 19 and studied at a technical college in Nairobi, would accompany him to the concert. Jomo wasn't particularly interested in jazz music, but he was fond of his young cousin and curious about this talent everyone was talking about. The day of the concert arrived, and Makina could barely contain his excitement. He wore his school uniform, freshly washed and pressed, the nicest clothing he owned. His mother had polished his shoes until they gleamed, and his father had given him a small notebook. "For your music thoughts," his father said gruffly, but Makina could see the pride in his eyes. The journey to Nairobi took nearly 2 hours by public bus. Makina pressed his face against the window, watching as rural landscapes gave way to crowded outskirts and finally, the towering buildings of the city center. Jomo met them at the bus station looking cool and urban in his jeans and t-shirt. "Ready for your big music adventure?" Jomo asked with a smile, ruffling Makina's neatly combed hair. The Grand Sovereign Hotel was unlike anything Makina had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the floors were so polished he could almost see his reflection. Well-dressed people streamed through the lobby, their expensive perfumes and colognes creating an invisible cloud of luxury. "Maybe I should wait outside," Makina whispered to Jomo, suddenly feeling small and out of place in his school uniform. "Nonsense," Jomo replied firmly. "You have a ticket, same as them. Besides, we came all this way. Are you going to let some fancy building scare you now?" Taking a deep breath, Makina straightened his shoulders and followed his cousin to the ticketing area. The woman at the counter raised an eyebrow at the two of them but checked their tickets without comment. The concert hall was already filling with people when they took their seats in the very last row. From this distance, the stage looked small, but Makina could clearly make out the grand piano positioned to one side. "That's a Steinway," he whispered reverently to Jomo, recognizing the famous instrument from a book Miss Akinyi had shown him. "The best piano in the world," Jomo nodded, pretending to understand why this was significant. As the lights dimmed and the crowd hushed, Makina leaned forward in his seat, eyes wide with anticipation. The band members walked onto the stage one by one, met by enthusiastic applause. Last to appear was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a beard, the professor, the famous pianist Tano had mentioned. From the first note, Makina was transfixed. The music washed over him in waves, complex and beautiful. He watched the professor's hands trying to memorize every movement, every technique, how his fingers seemed to barely touch some keys while striking others with force, how he used the pedals to extend certain notes, how he communicated with the other musicians through subtle nods and glances. During a particularly impressive solo, Makina unconsciously began to move his own fingers, playing along on an imaginary keyboard. Jomo noticed and nudged him gently. "You really understand what he's doing, don't you?" Jomo whispered, sounding impressed. Makina nodded without taking his eyes off the stage. "I can hear where the music wants to go before it gets there," he said simply. When intermission came, Makina didn't want to leave his seat, afraid of missing a single moment. But Jomo insisted they stretch their legs. As they wandered through the crowded lobby, Makina overheard snippets of conversation from the well-dressed audience members. The professor is really outdoing himself tonight. Did you hear that transition in the second piece? Absolutely brilliant. I heard they're looking for local talent to feature in their African tour documentary. That last comment made Makina stop in his tracks. Jomo, he said urgently, tugging on his cousin's sleeve. Did you hear that? They're looking for local musicians, Jomo frowned. So, you're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you? But Makina's mind was already racing ahead. I have to try, Jomo, I have to at least try. Makina, these are professional musicians. World-famous professionals. They're not going to let some kid from a village school join them on stage. I don't want to join them, Makina clarified. I just want them to hear me play, maybe they could give me advice. Or tell me if I have what it takes to be a real pianist someday. The look on Jomo's face softened. You really love this, don't you? It's not just about being special or getting attention. It's about the music, Makina said earnestly. When I play, I feel complete. Like I've found what I'm supposed to do with my life. Jomo sighed, recognizing the determination in his young cousin's eyes. All right, but how do you plan to approach them? There's security everywhere, and I doubt they'll just let you walk backstage. Makina bit his lip, thinking. After the show, he decided. When they're packing up, that's when I'll try to speak to the professor. The second half of the concert was even more magnificent than the first. The band played with increasing energy, feeding off the audience's enthusiasm. For the finale, the professor performed a solo piece so complex and beautiful that tears welled in Makina's eyes. As the audience gave a standing ovation, Makina turned to Jomo with shining eyes. Now, he said, I need to try now before they leave. Jomo hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but I'm coming with you. And if security stops us, we leave without arguing. Deal? Deal, Makina agreed, already moving toward the stage. His heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. People were beginning to file out of the concert hall, but Makina pushed against the flow, making his way closer to the stage where the band members were starting to pack up their instruments. He could see the professor closing the lid of the grand piano, chatting with the saxophone player. Taking a deep breath, Makina squared his shoulders and moved forward. Whatever happened next would change his life forever. He could feel it in his bones. I've created part 2 of Makina's story, focusing on his discovery of the famous jazz band and his journey to attend their concert in Nairobi. The narrative builds tension toward the climactic moment when he decides to approach the musicians. The story maintains the human-centric approach with natural dialogue and emotions that feel authentic. I've kept the language simple and engaging, with descriptive details that help bring the setting and characters to life. Would you like me to continue with part 3, or would you prefer to make any adjustments to part 2 first? Security at the Grand Sovereign Hotel was tight, especially near the stage. As Makina tried to make his way forward, a tall man in a black suit stepped directly into his path. Where do you think you're going, young man? The security guard asked, his voice firm but not unkind. I need to speak with the professor, Makina replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Please, it's important. The guard looked down at the boy in his school uniform, then at Jomo hovering protectively behind him. Do you have backstage passes? No, but then I'm sorry. No one goes backstage without proper authorization. Jomo placed a hand on Makina's shoulder. Come on, cousin, we tried. Let's go home, but Makina couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when he was so close. He looked past the guard to where the professor was gathering his sheet music from the piano. This might be his only chance. Sir, Makina said to the guard, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I've traveled 2 hours from my village to be here. I saved for weeks to buy a ticket. I just want 1 minute of his time, please. Something in the boy's earnest expression made the guard hesitate. In that moment of uncertainty, Makina spotted an opening. The saxophonist from the band was walking nearby, heading toward a side door. Excuse me, Makina called out, ducking around the guard and taking a few quick steps forward before he could be stopped. The saxophonist turned, surprised to see a young boy in a school uniform calling out to him. I'm sorry, Makina said quickly, aware that the guard was already moving to intercept him. I need to speak with the professor. I'm a pianist too. The saxophonist looked amused. Are you now? And how old are you, young pianist? 12. Almost 13. Makina added, standing as tall as he could. The guard reached them. I'm sorry, sir. These two were just leaving. The saxophonist held up a hand. Wait a moment. He studied McKenna with curious eyes. What's your name? McKenna, sir. And what did you want to say to the professor, McKenna? The guard seemed ready to protest, but the saxophonist's casual authority kept him silent. McKenna took a deep breath. I wanted to ask if I could play, just for a minute, on the piano. The request was so unexpected that both the saxophonist and the guard stared at him in surprise. Then the saxophonist let out a hearty laugh. Well, you certainly don't lack courage, do you? He glanced toward the stage where the professor was still gathering his things. Hey, Leon, he called out. You've got an admirer here who wants to show you something. The professor, Leon, looked up, his brow furrowed slightly at the interruption. He made his way over, his tall figure imposing up close. What's going on, Charlie? He asked the saxophonist. This young man here is a pianist, Charlie explained, gesturing to McKenna. Says he wants to play the piano. Your piano, specifically. Leon looked down at McKenna with raised eyebrows. Is that so? Under the famous musician's gaze, some of McKenna's courage faltered. He swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I've been teaching myself to play. I've never tried a real grand piano before. Teaching yourself? Leon repeated, his tone skeptical. Jomo stepped forward. It's true, sir. My cousin has a gift. He plays on an old keyboard at his school. He saved for weeks just to come here tonight. Leon studied the boy for a long moment. The concert hall was emptying out, staff beginning to clean up. A few curious onlookers had paused to watch the unusual interaction. The hotel has a strict schedule, Leon said finally. We need to clear out soon for another event. McKenna's heart sank. He nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. I understand. Thank you anyway for the amazing concert. I learned a lot just watching you play. He turned to leave, shoulders slumped. Jomo placed a comforting arm around him. Wait, Leon called after him. What were you planning to play? McKenna turned back, a small flame of hope rekindling. I wrote something myself. It's not very good, but you compose your own music. Leon interrupted, his interest visibly growing. Yes, I don't know how to write it down properly yet, but I remember the notes. Leon and Charlie exchanged glances. Then Leon nodded slightly. 1 minute, he said. You get 1 minute. And then we really do have to clear out. The security guard looked like he wanted to object but held his tongue. Charlie gave McKenna an encouraging smile. Thank you, sir. McKenna's face lit up with excitement and nervous energy. Thank you so much. As they walked back toward the stage, a small crowd began to gather, mostly hotel staff, some band members, and a few lingering audience members curious about what was happening. The grand piano seemed even larger up close. McKenna approached it reverently, running his fingers lightly over the polished surface before looking at Leon for permission to sit. Go ahead, Leon said, gesturing to the bench. McKenna sat down, adjusting his position as he'd seen Leon do during the concert. The keys before him were perfect. No missing notes, no sticking keys like the old keyboard at school. He placed his hands lightly on them, feeling their cool smoothness. Remember, 1 minute, the security guard reminded him. Looking at his watch, McKenna nodded, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were hesitant, his nervousness evident as his fingers shook slightly. But then as the music began to flow, something remarkable happened. McKenna forgot about the crowd watching him. He forgot about Leon standing just a few feet away. He forgot about the security guard timing him. He played the piece he had been composing over the past few weeks, a melody that wove traditional rhythms from his village with the complex jazz harmonies he'd been studying. The music told his story, the longing, the hope, the joy of discovery. His small fingers moved with surprising confidence across the keys, coaxing sounds from the magnificent instrument that seemed to fill the entire hall. Leon's expression changed from polite interest to genuine surprise. He moved closer, watching McKenna's hand positions, the natural way he approached complex transitions. Charlie, the saxophonist, had stopped packing up his instrument and was listening intently. Where did you learn that progression? Leon asked quietly when McKenna paused briefly between phrases. I heard something like it in your third piece tonight, McKenna answered without stopping. But I changed it a little. The 1 minute stretched to 2, then 3. No one interrupted. The hotel staff had stopped cleaning to listen. Even the security guard had forgotten about his watch. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Charlie picked up his saxophone and began to play along, following McKenna's melody with gentle improvisations. Surprised but delighted, Makina adjusted his playing to accommodate the new instrument, creating space for the saxophone to shine before returning to the piano melody. Leon watched this musical conversation with growing amazement. When the bassist from the band joined in, adding a rhythmic foundation to the impromptu performance, Leon turned to the drummer and nodded. Soon the entire band was playing, following the lead of a 12-year-old boy they had met just minutes ago. The music swelled, filling the empty concert hall with sound once more. People who had been leaving turned back, drawn by the unexpected encore. Hotel guests from the lobby wandered in, curious about the music. Several people had taken out their phones, recording the spontaneous performance. For 15 magical minutes, Makina led the world-famous band through his composition, his face alight with pure joy. When he finally brought the piece to a close, with a series of gentle chords that seemed to hang in the air, there was a moment of complete silence. Then applause erupted from the band members, the hotel staff, the scattered audience that had gathered. Makina looked up, startled, as if only now remembering where he was and what had just happened. Leon was staring at him with an expression that mingled shock and admiration. "Young man," he said slowly, "where exactly did you say you learned to play?" "At my school," Makina replied, suddenly shy again under all the attention. "On the keyboard in the music room, and sometimes I practice on a paper keyboard I made at home." "A paper keyboard?" Charlie repeated in disbelief. "Yes, sir. I drew the keys on cardboard so I could practice finger positions when I couldn't use the real keyboard." Leon shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. Finally, he extended his hand to Makina. "That was extraordinary," he said simply. "Truly extraordinary." As Makina stood up from the piano bench, he felt different somehow. Taller, more certain of his place in the world. He had played a Steinway grand piano. He had played with the golden sounds. And they had listened to him, really listened. "What happens now?" he asked, looking up at Leon. Leon exchanged glances with his bandmates, then smiled at the boy. "Now," he said, "we talk about your future." Jomo, who had been watching from the side with tears in his eyes, stepped forward to place a protective arm around his cousin's shoulders. "His family will want to be part of any discussion about his future," Jomo said firmly. Leon nodded with respect. "Of course. And they should be proud, very proud indeed." As they walked off the stage together, Makina couldn't help but look back at the grand piano gleaming under the stage lights. Just hours ago it had seemed like an impossible dream. Now somehow it felt like the beginning of something remarkable. I've created part 3 of Makina's story, focusing on his bold request to play the piano, and the remarkable moment when he gets his chance to perform with the professional musicians. The narrative builds tension through the initial rejection from security, and then follows the emotional journey as Makina demonstrates his extraordinary talent. The story maintains a human-centric approach with natural dialogue and authentic emotions. I've kept the language simple and engaging, with descriptive details that help bring the musical performance to life. Would you like me to continue with part 4? Or would you prefer to make any adjustments to part 3 first? News of what happened at the Grand Sovereign Hotel spread quickly. By the time Makina and Jomo returned to their village the next day, people were already talking about the boy who played with the golden sounds. Someone at the hotel had uploaded a video of the impromptu performance to social media, and within hours, it had thousands of views. Makina's parents were waiting anxiously when the bus pulled up. His mother rushed forward, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Everyone is talking about you," she whispered, her voice a mixture of pride and worry. "The school principal called this morning. Even the radio mentioned a boy from our district." His father stood back, his face unreadable, but when Makina met his eyes, he saw something new there. A kind of stunned respect. "Is it true?" his father asked quietly as they walked home. "Did you really play with those famous musicians?" "Yes, Baba," Makina replied. "They let me use the grand piano, and then they joined in with my song." His father shook his head in wonder. "Your song?" he repeated. "You played your own music for these important people." At home, Makina's younger siblings crowded around him, full of questions. His youngest sister, Tao, climbed onto his lap. "Are you famous now?" she asked, touching his face as if to check if he had somehow transformed overnight. Makina laughed. "No, Tao, I'm still just me, but things had changed." That became clear the next morning when a sleek car pulled up outside their modest home. A woman in a business suit stepped out, followed by Charlie, the saxophonist from the Golden Sounds. "Good morning," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Nyota from Sunrise Music Academy in Johannesburg. And of course you know Charlie." McKenna's father invited them inside, hurriedly offering the best seats in their small living area. McKenna's mother brought tea, her hands trembling slightly as she served these important visitors. "We've come to discuss a remarkable opportunity for your son," Nyota explained. "The video of his performance has caused quite a stir in musical circles." Charlie nodded. "Leon, the professor, he's been teaching at Sunrise Music Academy between tours for years. When he saw McKenna play, he immediately called Nyota." "I don't understand," McKenna's father said cautiously. "What kind of opportunity?" "A scholarship," Nyota replied. "A full scholarship to study piano at our academy. We've never offered this to someone so young before, but after seeing that video..." She turned to McKenna with genuine admiration. "You have something special, young man. Something that can't be taught." McKenna's parents exchanged worried glances. "Johannesburg?" his mother asked. "But that's in another country. He's only 12. Almost 13, McKenna reminded her automatically, his mind racing with possibilities. "We understand your concerns," Nyota assured them. "The scholarship includes housing in our student dormitory with full supervision. There would be regular check-ins with your family and of course holidays at home." Charlie leaned forward. "There's more," he said. "The Golden Sounds is continuing our African tour for the next 2 months. With your permission, we'd like McKenna to join us as a special guest performer for a few songs each night." The room fell silent. McKenna hardly dared to breathe. It seemed impossible, too much, too fast. Just days ago, he had been practicing on a broken keyboard, dreaming of someday playing real music. Now these people were offering him everything he had ever wanted. "He needs to finish his education," his father said finally, his voice firm. "Of course," Nyota agreed. "Academic classes are part of the program at Sunrise. Music is our focus, but students receive a full education." McKenna looked at his parents pleadingly. "Please," he whispered. "I want to learn. I need to learn." His father's expression was troubled. "We need time to think about this. To pray about this. It's too big a decision to make in one day." "I understand completely," Nyota said, handing them a folder. "Here's all the information about the academy. Our contact details are inside. Take the time you need." As they were leaving, Charlie paused at the door. "There's a talent in your son that comes along once in a generation," he told McKenna's parents. "Whatever you decide, don't let it go to waste." The days that followed were filled with discussions, prayers, and many tears. Some of joy, some of fear. McKenna's village teacher, Ms. Akinyi, came to speak with his parents, bringing along the principal. "I've taught music for 15 years, Ms. Akinyi told them. "What McKenna has, it's extraordinary. This opportunity could change his life." "That's what we're afraid of," McKenna's mother admitted. "We don't want to lose our son to a different world." The principal nodded sympathetically. "It's a difficult choice. But remember, giving him wings doesn't mean he'll fly away forever. It means he'll soar higher than we could have imagined." While the adults debated his future, McKenna returned to the school keyboard each day, playing with new confidence and purpose. Sometimes, children from the village would gather outside the music room window, listening in respectful silence. Occasionally, they would bring friends or family members from neighboring villages to hear "the boy from the video." One afternoon, McKenna was startled when an older man he didn't recognize appeared at the music room doorway. "Don't stop," the man said when McKenna paused. "That was beautiful." "Thank you," McKenna replied politely. "Are you looking for someone?" The man smiled. "I was looking for you, actually. I'm Dr. Kabiri from the National Conservatory of Music in Nairobi. Your video has caused quite a stir among our faculty." McKenna blinked in surprise. "You saw it too?" "Everyone has seen it, young man. It's quite remarkable." He gestured to the keyboard. "May I?" McKenna nodded, moving aside to let Dr. Kabiri sit at the keyboard. The man placed his hands on the keys and played a complex classical piece McKenna didn't recognize. Despite the keyboard's limitations, the music was captivating. "Bach," Dr. Kabiri explained when he finished. "One of the greatest composers who ever lived." He turned to face McKenna. "I understand Sunrise Academy has offered you a scholarship." "Yes, sir. But my parents haven't decided yet." "That's wise. It's a big decision." Dr. Kabiri handed McKenna a business card. I wanted to let you know that our conservatory would also be interested in having you as a student. We're here in Kenya, which might be preferable for your family." McKenna's head was spinning. 2 music schools wanted him? It seemed impossible. That evening, he found his parents sitting outside their home talking quietly. "Another school wants me," he told them, showing them Dr. Kabiri's card. "This one is in Nairobi." His father took the card, examining it carefully. "Do you have a preference, McKenna?" he asked. "If we were to allow this, where would you want to go?" McKenna sat between his parents, feeling the weight of the choice before them. "I want to learn," he said simply. "I want to become the best pianist I can be, but—" He hesitated. "I don't want to leave you and never come back." His mother pulled him close. "You would always come back," she said fiercely. "This will always be your home." The following week brought another visitor, Leon himself, the professor who had taken a day away from the tour to visit their village. He didn't come with formal offers or folders of information. Instead, he asked to hear McKenna play on the school keyboard, nodding thoughtfully as he listened. "You have a natural understanding of jazz that's remarkable," Leon told him afterward. "But there's so much more to learn. Classical technique, music theory, composition. Which school would be better for that?" McKenna asked boldly. Leon smiled. "Both are excellent. Sunrise has more resources, more international connections. The conservatory has deep roots in African musical traditions." He paused, considering. "What matters most is that you keep playing, keep creating. The rest will follow." Before leaving, Leon spoke privately with McKenna's parents. No one told McKenna what was said, but that night his father called a family meeting. "We have prayed for guidance," his father began solemnly. "We have spoken with your teachers, with both schools, with these musicians who see such potential in you." McKenna held his breath. "We believe that God gives each person gifts to be used, not hidden." His father continued. "Your gift is music, McKenna. We cannot stand in the way of that." His mother wiped tears from her eyes but smiled bravely. "We have decided to accept the offer from the National Conservatory in Nairobi. You will live with your uncle during the week and come home on weekends when possible. And," his father added, watching McKenna's face closely, "we give permission for you to join the Golden Sounds for 3 performances, no more, before your studies begin. On the condition that Jomo travels with you." Joy exploded in McKenna's chest. He jumped up, hugging both his parents tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I'll make you proud." "You already have," his father replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Just remember who you are and where you come from, no matter where this gift takes you." That night McKenna lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with melodies and possibilities. From the broken keyboard to the grand stage, from his small village to the world beyond, the journey ahead seemed vast and unknown. Yet for the first time, it also seemed possible. I've created part 4 of McKenna's story, focusing on the aftermath of his performance and the opportunities that emerge. This section explores the family's struggle with this sudden change, the difficult decisions they face, and how McKenna begins to navigate between his village roots and his musical future. The story maintains a human-centric approach with emotional depth in the family dynamics. I've kept the language simple and engaging, with authentic dialogue that captures the conflicting emotions of pride, worry, and hope. Would you like me to continue with the final part 5? Or would you prefer to make any adjustments to part 4 first? 6 years passed like a dream. On a warm afternoon, McKenna stood at the entrance of his old primary school, now a young man of 18. The building looked smaller than he remembered, the walls more weathered, but the sound of children singing drifted through open windows just as it always had. "It feels strange to be back," he told Miss Akinyi, who had met him at the gate, her hair now streaked with gray. "But good strange, I hope," she replied with a warm smile. McKenna nodded, adjusting the strap of the leather bag slung across his shoulder. Inside was his laptop, filled with music he had composed over the years, and a small photo album his mother had insisted he bring. "The children are so excited to meet you," Ms. Akinyi said as they walked toward the music room. "They've been practicing for weeks." The path was familiar. He had walked it countless times as a child, but McKenna himself was transformed. The shy 12-year-old with worn shoes and a second-hand uniform had become a confident young musician, his name known in concert halls across Africa and beyond. Those first 3 performances with the golden sounds had changed everything. Standing on stage in Nairobi, Kampala, and finally Johannesburg, playing his own compositions alongside musicians he had once only dreamed of meeting. The experience had shown him what was possible. The National Conservatory had been challenging in ways he hadn't expected. There were other talented students there, some from wealthy families who had been taking private lessons since they were toddlers. For the first time, Makena had faced real competition, even occasional mockery for his humble background. "Where did you train before this?" an instructor had asked during his first week, frowning after Makena played a piece with unconventional fingering. "At my village school," Makena had answered honestly. "On a keyboard with missing keys." The instructor had looked skeptical, but Leon, who had become Makena's mentor and visited the conservatory regularly to check on his progress, had stepped in. "Technique can be taught," Leon had told the instructor. "But what this young man has naturally, the musicality, the creativity that can't be taught, that's why he's here." Those early months had been the hardest. Homesickness hit Makena like a physical pain some nights. Living with his uncle in Nairobi, surrounded by the noise and pace of the city, he would lie awake missing the sounds of his village, the crickets at night, his siblings breathing in the shared bedroom, his mother's soft singing as she prepared breakfast. But gradually things had improved. Makena learned proper technique, music theory, and composition. He practiced until his fingers ached, determined to prove himself worthy of the opportunity he'd been given. His natural talent, combined with his fierce work ethic, soon earned the respect of both instructors and fellow students. By 15, he was performing regularly at concerts organized by the conservatory. By 16, he had been invited to music festivals in neighboring countries. At 17, he had released his first album, a collection of original compositions that blended classical piano techniques with the jazz influences of the golden sounds and the traditional rhythms of his village. The album, titled Paper Keys, had brought him attention far beyond what he could have imagined. Music critics praised its authentic voice and unique cultural perspective. When it won Best New Artist at the Continental Music Awards, Makena had stood on stage stunned and grateful, thanking his family, Ms. Akinyi, and the musicians who had believed in him that night at the Grand Sovereign Hotel. Now, as he approached the familiar music room of his childhood, Makena felt the circle of his journey completing itself. He paused at the doorway, looking at the old keyboard. Still there, still missing the same keys. "We've tried to get a new one," Ms. Akinyi said apologetically, following his gaze. "The school budget, it's perfect," Makena interrupted, smiling as he ran his fingers over the worn plastic keys. This is where it all started. 20 children sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide as they recognized the visitor. A whisper ran through the group. "It's him! It's really him." Makena set down his bag and pulled up the small bench. "Hello," he said simply. "I'm Makena. I used to sit right where you're sitting now, dreaming about playing piano." A small girl in the front row raised her hand. "Yes?" Makena encouraged. "Is it true you played with the golden sounds when you were 12? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, that's true." Another child called out. "My brother says you live in America now and play in big concert halls." Makena laughed. "I visited America for some performances, but I live in Nairobi most of the year. And yes, some of the concert halls are very big, but do you know something?" He leaned forward as if sharing a secret. "I still get nervous before every performance, just like I did when I first played on this keyboard." For the next hour, Makena played for the children. Everything from classical pieces he'd learned at the conservatory, to jazz standards he'd performed with the golden sounds, to his own compositions. Despite the keyboard's limitations, the music filled the small room with joy. Then he did something he'd been planning for months. From his bag, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to Ms. Akinyi. "What's this?" she asked, opening it carefully. "The proceeds from my last 3 concerts," Makena explained. "Enough to build a proper music room for the school with real instruments, not just for piano but for a full program. And scholarships for 5 students each year to attend weekend classes at the National Conservatory." Ms. Akinyi's hand flew to her mouth. "Makena, this is too much." "It's not nearly enough," he replied softly. "You saw something in me when no one else did. You gave me the key that unlocked everything else. Now it's my turn to do the same for others." After the children left, buzzing with excitement about the famous visitor, Makena walked through the village with Ms. Akinyi. People waved from doorways, calling out greetings. Some of his old classmates, now working in various jobs around the village, came to shake his hand. "Tano," Makena exclaimed, spotting his childhood friend. "You haven't changed a bit." Tano laughed, gesturing to his mechanic's overalls. "Neither have you, still obsessed with that piano. My brother owes me money now. He bet you'd give up after a year." As they approached his family home, Makena felt his heart quicken. Despite his success, despite the applause of audiences around the world, this homecoming still mattered most. His mother was waiting at the door just as she always had when he was a child. Behind her stood his father, his siblings, Tao, now a teenager herself, and relatives from around the district who had gathered to welcome him home. "My son," his mother whispered, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "My son has come home." Later that evening, as the family gathered for a meal, Makena's father raised his glass in a toast. "When Makena first told us he wanted to be a pianist, I thought it was a child's fantasy," he admitted. "I wanted him to choose a practical path, something secure." He looked at his son with pride shining in his eyes. "I was wrong. The path that seemed most uncertain turned out to be exactly where he was meant to go." Makena nodded gratefully, but added, "I couldn't have taken a single step without you. Baba, without all of you." He looked around at his family. "Everything I play, everywhere I go, I carry this place with me." After dinner, as the stars appeared overhead, Makena sat with his youngest sister Tao, who had recently started showing interest in music herself. "Will I ever be as good as you?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. "You'll be different," Makena replied thoughtfully. "That's more important than being as good. Music isn't about comparison. It's about finding your own voice." "But how did you know you would succeed?" Tao persisted. "Weren't you scared when you asked those famous musicians to let you play?" Makena laughed. "I was terrified. My knees were shaking so badly I thought I might fall over. But sometimes the thing that scares you most is exactly the thing you need to do." He squeezed her hand. "The worst that can happen is someone says no. But if they say yes, everything can change." That night, Makena sat at the old wooden table where he had once done his homework, writing in a new composition book. The melody flowing from his pen was different from his earlier work, more mature perhaps, but with the same heart. He was writing a piece called "Coming Home," inspired by the sounds of his village, the voices of his family, the memories of where his journey began. In a few days, he would return to Nairobi, then fly to London for a series of performances. But this moment of connection to his roots, was what gave those performances their meaning. Outside, the same stars that had watched over a 12-year-old boy drawing piano keys on cardboard now shone down on the man he had become. The circle was complete, but the music played on. I've created the final Part 5 of Makena's story, which takes place 6 years after the events of Part 4. This conclusion shows how his initial breakthrough moment led to a successful musical career while maintaining his connection to his roots. It brings his journey full circle as he returns to help other children from his village discover their own musical talents. The narrative emphasizes the importance of staying true to oneself despite success, the value of giving back to one's community, and how Makena's relationship with his family evolved over time. The story maintains the human-centric approach with emotional depth and authentic dialogue. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this final part? Or would you like me to compile all 5 parts into a single document?